But you offered such a great transition with Pascal Groß and Borussia Dortmund, and you are so very right. I watched the game in full on Saturday afternoon, and this Dortmund game was such of those. Let's call them the big three or the big more. I guess Leipzig are in the big four. So I want to touch on Leipzig in just a moment. We're working our way backwards here. That's just what's happening. But of those big teams that we're going to discuss today, I thought Dortmund's performance was the most professional. And it was at times boring. I'm not going to lie. But they ended this game with 66% possession. They dominated Frankfurt by playing 697 passes over 293 passes. 93% pass accuracy for Borussia Dortmund. They won the sprints. They won more tackles. They almost suffocated a Frankfurt team that at times were dangerous. Hugo Ekitike really stood out for me. I thought he actually had, despite not scoring, a really good game. But it was one of those games where it just seemed a matter of time until Dortmund were going to score and win the game. And I thought it was really fascinating how important in that Pascal Groß was for them, right? He really bossed that midfield, had a really good game. I think the attack at times didn't really quite fit with what Dortmund were trying to do. That got better with substitutions when Adeyemi came off for Maxi Bayer, or when Jamie Giddens would obviously he scored a brace, so he had a great game coming off the bench, right? That just gave them a bit more structure and attacking wise. But in terms of what Dortmund were doing in playing this game, I think there was a really good indication of how the season was going to go. You can see that Nuri Sahin as a coach is trending towards that Sebastian Hoeneß, Javi Alonso school of thought, isn't he? In terms of the relationism is called, right? Where you create these pockets of possession all over the field. You try to suffocate the opponent. It's a little bit less possession-based, but a little bit more possession-based. It's a little bit less of a counter-attacking style or counter-pressing or gegenpressing, as this podcast is named. It's a new school of thought that is slowly but surely creeping into the Bundesliga, and it seems like in Nuri Sahin there is another proponent of it. And I thought, the game wasn't exciting at times as it was with the other two or the other three of the big four, but it was definitely very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I was really intrigued to see how Dortmund would go into this game, because I watched their Pokal game in which it was more or less the same sort of setup. And that was a game in which, Pascal Groß really dominated. He's already kind of made himself that kind of number 6 who sits at the base of midfield. He kind of splits the two central defenders. I mean, in a funny way, like, Nuri Sahin kind of plays a back four with, Ryerson, Anton, Sula and Schlotterbeck. And he's done that in both of his first two games. But in practice, it's more of a back five, with Ryerson obviously pushing up as a wing back. Gross kind of sits in between Anton and Sula, and then Schlotterbeck, who we all know is more than happy to kind of bomb forward, more than happy to kind of try and thread passes in the final third, and even swing in crosses if and when necessary. And having him out left, I think, is actually a really smart kind of solution to Dortmund's left-back problems, really, where they don't really have any kind of outstanding players. And, obviously Benzabaini is still in the team, who I think is a very limited fullback, to be honest, at this level. And then beyond that, you're really kind of struggling, to be honest. So I think Schlotterbeck slotted in there actually works very well, because out of possession is actually a very defensive system, especially with Gross in there. But then in attack, obviously Ryerson and Schlotterbeck can kind of bomb forward. And yeah, it was an interesting match. I mean, I think obviously Dortmund do have a very good kind of head-to-head record against Frankfurt. They're a team that they seem to have this kind of impressive kind of psychological edge over. And I did think going into the game that it was going to be one in which Dortmund kind of dominated, but Frankfurt would have their moments to kind of score goals, because even in that Pokal match, they still conceded a goal to Lübeck. It was a great goal from the Lübeck player, but it was a game in which it was a moment in which Dortmund just turned off for 10 seconds, and they're still capable of doing that. But it's fascinating, because I do feel like for all that Sahin does maybe have his tactics the right way, and I think he does have a really good system of that back four and Gregor Kobel behind him, obviously. So that does explain why they're maybe so composed and, as you said, professional. I think in front of them, there's still some issues. For example, I'm just not entirely sure what Emre Can does in this team anymore. There were times, especially in that Lubeck game, where he came short to get the ball. And even against basically a professional team, he got caught in possession, he tripped over the ball. And with Gross now in that team, I'm just not sure what Can is there to do. I know he's maybe a midfield enforcer. Maybe he makes tackles or protects Gross, but I don't know. I feel like in a game like this, you could have just stuck Sabitzer in there or something and then maybe just left it there. And maybe that leaves Dortmund exposed. I'm not quite sure. But I mean, I'd be intrigued to hear what you think about that and whether you think they ultimately had to rely on like moments of brilliance from Gittins to win the day.
Coaches seem to love and the rest of us just don't seem to get, Stefan. I still think to this day that Germany would have beaten Spain if they had stuck with Kroos and Andrich in that midfield rather than Emre Can. Yet, somehow Emre Can wormed his way into this national team squad and into the starting 11. He is the captain of this Borussia Dortmund team. I don't know. I don't know. I guess he has his moments where when he's really on, he can provide a lot of edge and a lot of control. But he also has these many moments of madness and these many moments where he doesn't seem to where he does seem to do more than what is asked of him. This is the thing I like about Robert Andrich. Robert Andrich, you give a task and you tell him what to do and he does it, right? He's a trooper. He's a true soldier. We will go to the trenches for you. And interestingly enough, and I think this is actually something that I find really fascinating about Andrich versus Emre Can is, Robert Andrich is actually a way more gifted footballer than he's being given credit for, but because he had to work so hard to get into the position that he's in now, he still relies on the things that he's good at the most, right? Because that's how he got there, work ethic. Emre Can is almost the reverse of that. Emre Can was always really this highly touted, next coming of Sami Khedira, kind of defensive midfielder. So rather than having to work hard to get where he was almost gifted that. And his best skills are those of a hard-working defensive midfielder. But if you're not putting in the hard work, those skills are just lost. And that is what I sometimes see with Emre Can. And it baffles me that there's still so much reliance on him and his leadership and all that kind of stuff. And it might be dressing room culture that's just lost on us. I think that, sometimes we give these things that go on in the dressing room where a player can really insert themselves there and, create a political environment that supports them. And then it also guarantees the playing minute because you need to have that chemistry on the field as well. But yeah, I don't know. It's if you have someone like Pascal Gross, a player like Emre Can makes sense, but then he needs to play like Emre Can. And I think I don't see that all the time. There was times when they went for the title challenge, and I wrote an article on that, right, where I thought Emre Can was excellent next to Jude Bellingham, because for a stretch of 10, 15 games, he focused on being Emre Can. And I think that is what needs to happen here. We need to see Emre Can basically realizing that he belongs to the Robert Andrichs of this world and isn't the second coming of Sami Khedira, and just get this job done, and then this will be fine. But yeah, it is a fascinating one for me because obviously head coaches love him, Stefan.
Yeah, I suppose they do. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what Dortmund do when they play quote unquote lesser teams, because obviously opening day against Frankfurt, Sahin's just probably thinking we just need to make sure we win this game and take it from there. Really try to keep it tight at the back, don't concede. And as you said, in the end it worked out being a very kind of professional job because that's exactly what they did. But they travel to Werder Bremen next, and I'd be quite surprised if I saw Can and Pascal Gross still in the base of midfield again. Just because there are other players that can play there. I'm also, although having said that, I'm also quite intrigued by the way that he basically played with two number 10s in Sabitzer and Julian Brandt. You know, obviously Brandt down the left, Sabitzer down the right. And it worked to an extent. I know Sabitzer obviously came close with a chance. I think Brandt had a few chances as well. And then obviously he kind of changed things when he brought Gio Reyna and Nemcha on. And then you kind of suddenly think, well, if Sabitzer is going to kind of revert back to this number 10 position, which he was, you know, at Leipzig when he was really at the top of his, the top of his powers really as a player, then kind of suddenly leaves Dortmund with actually very few options in the base of midfield to play alongside Ross, because you've really got Emre Can, Nemcha, and that's really about it, isn't it? So where do you go from there? And so it'll be interesting to see if Sahin does kind of just stick with Chan, because he's like, well, we simply don't have anyone else, and Nemcha hasn't really been kind of making a claim for a starting position yet, or if he does kind of like almost kind of retrofit Sabitzer in there, so we can play someone like Gittins, on the white in one of the white positions instead of Sabitzer. But we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, as you said, very professional performance against a decent Frankfurt side who still have a lot of kind of quality up front, who I think will be absolutely fine this season, to be honest with you. I haven't really touched on them at all, but I think they've actually had a pretty decent summer. They've still got a very solid starting 11. And, you know, losing 2-0 at the Westfalenstadion on match day 1 isn't really going to make a huge difference to what happens to them this season.
Yeah, I actually thought that they played quite well at times. Hugo Ekitike looked great. Their midfield was dangerous. They have plenty of attacking options. I think, you know, they could have made this a little bit more interesting at times. And at the end of the day, I think they will be absolutely fine. I think the only question mark with them, and we mentioned this in the previous show, is maybe Dino Topmöller, but I think that is maybe something for another day. I want to briefly touch on the main Saturday results